Now, two people who fought the war on drugs. Neill Franklin was a narcotics agent in Baltimore. Paul Chabot served in the drug czar's office under Presidents Clinton and Bush. Paul's pro-drug war, Neill's against. Paul, let's go to you first. Everything we've seen, you're alone in this program in some ways, except for some in the audience. What am I getting wrong? This war is causing more problems than the drugs.
Let's first off take the concept of a war. We definitely do have a war against drug cartels, against crime on our streets, but not against our own people who are dealing with drug addiction. Our government and our position has been that we look at this through treatment, education, prevention, and...
Well, this may be the position, but they're banging into people's houses and doing what we just saw.
I would disagree. With 300 million people in this country, you're going to find incidents like this across the communities. There's bound to be press. I went to a funeral of a SWAT officer who was killed on a raid. So we get our own dropped on these kind of very serious incidents. Cops don't know what they're going into. And I would argue
none of it would happen if drugs were legal.
Well, I disagree with that. I think we have a number of people. Today we look at alcohol. Look at all the problems we have in our communities because of alcohol and prescription drug abuse. Do we want to cross that line now and go into other drugs and add that to the benchmark of problems we already have? My answer as a dad, not a cop, as a dad would be a resounding no.
Neill, what's your answer? And just to be clear, both of you have locked up hundreds of people for drugs, right?
Absolutely, and been responsible for task forces who have locked up thousands in Maryland.
What's your answer to what he says?
Well, I agree with being a dad. Yeah, it's up to dads.
That's easy.
Okay, it's up to dads to make that decision for their children. But, you know, the war on drugs has caused drug wars in our neighborhoods. We are losing police officers unnecessarily every year, and I think we owe it to them, and not just police officers, but innocent people in our communities are dying now because of the wars in our streets.
All right, most of your fellow officers, though, side with him.
Oh, that's not true. And I talk to my fellow officers.
I
talk to my fellow officers every day. And when you get them alone, they will tell you straight up, this is nonsense. This is absolutely nonsense. Now, the overtime's good, but it's nonsense that we're out here chasing people off corners for drug use.
Paul, what's your answer to that?
Well, I respectfully disagree. I think it's disingenuous to think that law enforcement is, you know, for your position, sir. It's not the case. Let's look across our communities. And if I may ask your audience one simple question. How many of you know somebody who's died due to a substance abuse-related incident? Any kind of incident, raise your hands.
All right, they died when the drug was already illegal, so what good does the law do?
Right, so let me take this to my next point. Just because we may not have an infinite answer on defeating this drug war, which we don't like to call it a drug war, do we simply give up and wave the white flag? We're never going to eliminate crime off our streets. So because we don't eliminate crime, do we just turn the tables and go, let's just let it go? We're always going to have this.
Crime is about people doing things to other people, hurting them directly.
Most of whom are under the influence of illegal drugs.
Let me ask a question. How many of you would use crack cocaine if it were legal tomorrow?
No one would try crack cocaine? Paul, you talked about the damage done by alcohol.
Right.
Do you want to go back to alcohol prohibition?
Yeah, why not?
I tell you what, I would say this. We've already crossed that line in our community. I think we are where we are. The things we have to look at as a society is, look at all the problems we already have because of alcohol. Do we want to add now more problems to that already existing problem? My answer would be a resounding no.
And we tried to get rid of the alcohol problems with prohibition. We created Al Capone, etc. Aren't we doing the same thing with drugs?
Well, I think we're better off fighting the fight than not fighting the fight. First off, our communities, our societies have become a lot more violent today. We look at the Mexican drug cartels, which have made inroads into all of our communities, the very violent street gangs and thugs that we have. They're not going to go away if we simply legalize or legitimize drugs. They're very resilient organizations. They'll simply move into human smuggling, arms smuggling. We already have cigarette smuggling in this country. So just because something's legal doesn't mean the black market evaporates. They just simply adapt.
There are no beer cartels or wine smugglers.
Well, here's the reason why. Who's going to come across Mexico with 2-3 gallons of wine on their back for a few bucks, and you can come across with a few pounds of pot?
But that's the point of legalizing.
And they're no longer
coming. You can't get rich. There's no huge profit. There's no incentive to arm yourself and form a gang.
Here's the thing.
People are...
Let him answer.
Yeah, thank you. Look, we can't box marijuana and all these other drugs separately. We look at methamphetamine and the epidemic that we had in this country. Do we simply legalize meth? We know personally, or at least we should, the damage this has done to our country. Here's the point that people have to ask themselves. A, I live in California. Over 1,000 pot shops in the street of L.A., more than Starbucks, McDonald's, 7-Elevens combined. Go to San Francisco today. Go to a park. Parents no longer take their kids to the park in San Francisco.
Parks no longer pleasant in San Francisco? It's remarkable. I have to go check that out. But thank you, Paul and Neill. Stay